if you haven't heard, President Trump is requesting that we join him in the swamp on January 6th. In fact, he tweeted, quote, "Big protest in DC on January 6th. Be there. We'll be wild," unquote. So, I will be going, and I hope to see some of you there. In fact, if you do spot me in the crowd, come up and say, hey, I love that, it's awesome. And I know that January 6th is actually a Wednesday, and some of you have to work. You know, conservatives often have jobs, unlike, Antifa, which, well, they don't. So, if you need to make plans, make them now, give your employer as much notice as possible. And I do have some tips, though. If you are gonna go and join me and President Trump, I've learned that it's a bad idea to stay in Washington, D.C., like with your hotel. For one thing, it's expensive, but more importantly than that, it's like the hotels usually don't have anywhere to park. That sounds ridiculous because even in big cities, usually if you stay at a hotel, they have a parking lot. But surprisingly, most of them don't. And they'll say something on their website like, valet parking. And then you find out what they're doing with their valet parking is taking your car somewhere a couple of miles away, to go park it in some remote location. So there's that, and there's the fact that traffic in Washington, D.C. is kind of terrifying. And by kind of, I mean, it's really terrifying. It's like the worst traffic I've ever been in, by far. And if you live in a big city, you might think, you know what bad traffic is like. Washington, D.C. takes it to a whole new level. It's like Rome, Italy. It's infamous amongst people who've tried to drive there. In fact, it's even terrifying when you have a taxi driver. I was there a few weeks ago for a protest, and there was, I was there in a cab, and this taxi driver kept pulling out in front of people and then honking at the people who he just pulled out in front of. It was insane, but that's completely normal for them. They do it constantly. And you see the people who don't have, local license plates. You see these people from elsewhere in the US, and they look terrified. They're like white, like pale, and they seem completely horrified by the regular drivers from Washington, D.C. So consider yourself warned. You don't want to drive in there if you can help it. I have stayed in Alexandria and also in Arlington. They're just on the edge of Washington, D.C., so you can get in and out as you need to. You don't have the traffic problems, and you don't have the same degree of crime that you have in Washington, D.C. And I say that because for the most part, the Second Amendment doesn't matter in Washington, D.C., so it's a violent hellhole, and, you get the idea. But if you end up going to one of these protests, including this one, be aware Antifa isn't really a problem during the day. I know, when you look at the way that these protests are reported, you wouldn't think so. Because you have sensationalists on the left and on the right who make it sound like these, pro-Trump rallies are always, full of Antifa scum who are just fighting Trump supporters left and right. And that's not the way that they are. I mean, during the day, you won't see any Antifa, most likely. And if you do, they certainly won't be fighting. That's because they're so incredibly outnumbered. That's not what they do. Further, the police are out in force during the day, so it just doesn't happen. And even the conservative media I saw lying about this in relation to the last protest that I went to. They were just totally dishonest. And even Rebel News, and I found it just kind of, more jarring because I'm used to it from the leftist press. I don't think we should be the ones that are lying. Anyway, so if you do go to the Trump event, don't expect any problems with Antifa if you're there during the day. If you stay at night when you're alone and, separated from crowds, then things get, dicey and different, of course, because that's how Antifa likes to strike. That's how they are. But if you're there in the day, you'll be there with an army of, several hundred thousands, and you won't have to worry. All right? By the way, Trumpers tend to be super friendly. And I said this several different protests I've been to. They are some of the friendliest people I've ever met. You can just go up to them and talk to them, and they'll be very happy to, just converse with you. They're some of the friendliest people around, and that makes for a really nice, friendly atmosphere. So don't think that you're going to fight as you're going to a protest. And some people won't go to a protest because they're afraid that, they don't want to get into some big brawl. That's not the way that they are. They are some of the friendliest and best environments that you can go to. You'll be there amongst friends. One time when I went to a regular Trump rally, I was offered gloves. They were just like, here, you look so cold, here's some gloves. And the most recent protest, there was a guy there who was just hanging out and offering food. He wasn't there to sell the food. He was just like, here, They were just really friendly people. That's what I'm getting at. Anyway, this protest is different in one regard, and that is that with all these other protests that have taken place, including those over the last several weeks, they've been organized by various different third-party groups, who are well-intentioned, but it's different to this one, because this one is the first that President Trump himself is starting. See, that tweet that he posted seems to reference some already existing protest, except there wasn't one. This is him starting a protest, starting a gathering, and requesting that we go. And so that's totally different from one of these others. Like, for a regular protest, it's kind of like you either go or you don't, and it's not really a big deal either way. But when President Trump himself asks you to go, it's kind of different. Like, for me, it's not just part of my job for this, it's almost like duty at that point. Like, I've been summoned, and you have too, by the way. So anyway, I do hope to see you there. Like I said, I'll be there. If you spot me in the crowd, come say hello. Alright, thanks. Wait, if you enjoyed that video, please remember to like and share. I can't grow without you. Also, if you want to be reliably notified of new videos, don't forget to subscribe to the newsletter. If you're able to support the production of these videos, I'd appreciate it if you'd subscribe at Subscribestar, or maybe get one of the healthier products, or even get some merch.